He was so close to inheriting the throne, he didn't even have to do anything but wait. The number of disadvantages of doing what he was about to do was too many to count. The only advantage of this plan was that it solved the problem at hand. If that was to be the case, then usurpation might be a stupid idea on paper, but if he was to allow the status quo to remain as is, there would not be a kingdom to speak of soon. Zanac had hoped that he could at the very least receive approval from the courtiers present. There was also a need for him to request the services of that man from his sister. Brain and loss was an indispensable part of his plan. If Brain was there, they would definitely have the upper hand in terms of strength. Ah, how frustrating. Why do I have to plan this out in the first place? If only the Sorcerer's Kingdom did not exist. If only that freakishly powerful undead being did not exist. If not for the Sorcerer's Kingdom, if not for its intervention with their annual battle with the Empire, though his brother may have become king already, the kingdom would still not be forced into the corner as it had been now. Zanac cursed in his heart. And then, the sound of door knocks could be heard. Zanac had a premonition. To interrupt a meeting this important, it must be an emergency. To be honest, the way they were knocking on the door was quite violent too. Issues of such importance were usually, no, they were definitely bad news. That was Zanac's premonition. Zanac, as their representative, gave his approval to let them in. A knight entered the room in a panic, just as he had expected. A foreigner from the Sorcerer's Kingdom has just notified us that their Prime Minister, Albedo, will arrive at the capital in less than 2 hours. In their previous communications, the title of Guardian Overseer did not make much sense to them, so they had apparently switched her title to that of the easily understandable Prime Minister. Did the arrival of a person of such caliber confirm his apprehension? No, wait. His premonition was off the mark. This wasn't bad news, but the worst news. So, for what purpose has she come for? The envoy who had brought the official document was not inside this palace. Though he had wanted it to linger within the capital, they did not have the courage to let an undead creature stay with them. This was why it was currently staying within a mansion in the nobilities portion of the city. They had stationed guards around the mansion under the guise of protection. The perimeter was so tightly guarded that not even a slime could make it out without them noticing, but the envoy had apparently yet to contact the Sorcerer's Kingdom. Could they have been communicating through magical means? Or did they plan to visit the kingdom even if the envoy had not returned? Also, they had not sent the forerunner before they had departed, but rather this late into their journey. What for? With that said, it doesn't seem as though they're here to declare war. If they were here to declare war, they would not be sending their second most powerful official into territories where they were uncertain of what could happen. As an envoy from a foreign nation, the kingdom would not dare harm her, though she might have that naive idea. However, from Zanac's perspective, she did not appear to be the kind of person to wander into territory she knew would be dangerous to her. Grant her an audience. Prepare the throne room for an appropriate reception immediately. Yes, Your Majesty. The knight left the room upon hearing his father's orders. Usually, even if a foreign dignitary was to come to the capital, it wasn't as though they would be granted an audience with the king on the same day. But, given their current situation, they couldn't just tell the Prime Minister of the Sorcerer's Kingdom things like, "You will be granted an audience in a few days." Everyone, I apologize, but can you all switch to more formal attire and gather in the throne room? Upon hearing their king's request, the courtiers including Zanac, lowered their heads. The throne room used for audiences with envoys, there were multiple throne rooms each for separate purposes, wasn't too large, but to prepare it so that it was adequate enough for dignitaries was still a sizable time commitment. However, since the guide they had sent was quite slow, this wasn't a deliberate move by them to buy them more time. They had just enough time to prepare the room and gather the courtiers who were now clothed in ceremonious attire, before the Prime Minister of the Sorcerer's Kingdom, Albedo, arrived. The smell of the freshly cut flowers began to permeate the room. To Zanac, it all just smelled grassy, but Renner would probably put it as, Ani-sama probably just has a stuffy nose. Or something similar. He felt that fresh flowers were unnecessary, given that everybody was wearing some sort of perfume, but he understood that there was a certain beauty to the sight of blooming flowers. If that was the case though, why couldn't they just use fake flowers? Well, since there was no precedent for that, the use of fake flowers could give envoys the wrong impression that they weren't welcome there. That would be troublesome. Every race had comparable acts of etiquette, yet the same action could be interpreted differently by different races. So how did the Council State, which was home to various non-human races, manage this issue? The reason why this thought came across his mind out of nowhere was because of the horns and wings on the Prime Minister of the Sorcerer's Kingdom, Albedo, who had just walked in. As the Prime Minister of the Sorcerer's Kingdom, the seductive beauty had a dark air of allure about her, unchanged from the last time he had seen her. Her beauty was such that it could almost make them forget that she was a high-ranking official of the despicable Sorcerer's Kingdom. He wasn't sure she had been spoken for, but she was bewitching enough that countries would go to war over her. That was the Prime Minister of the Sorcerer's Kingdom, Albedo. The sound of men who had become instantly love-stricken could be heard throughout the room, the sound they made as they sighed, ooh. The nobles who had made those sounds were also obvious in their enraptured ogles. The beauty who was able to instantly hold them captive, gradually let out a smile that was like that of a loving mother. Perhaps no one else in this world could produce such a charming smile. Though Zanac's sister was also considered a beauty, he thought Albedo's beauty could even outshine hers. The only odd aspect about her was her gown. If they were at a ball, nothing would be more appropriate than that light peach-colored gown, but given their current situation, it wasn't proper at all. She couldn't have worn it by mistake. It had to be on purpose. What is the hidden meaning behind all of this? Zanac had no ideas regarding the implications of the different types of gowns worn by women. Perhaps his sister would be able to figure it out, but she wasn't exactly normal compared to the other women of the aristocracy. With that said, her decision to not spend too much on herself out of disinterest in sprucing herself up had earned Zanac's respect. Zanac stole a glance at his sister. She wasn't wearing her usual gown, but the one she had worn for ceremonies. She couldn't be wearing the same clothes as she had the last time they welcomed Albedo, right? Though he wanted to tell Renner not to wear that outfit as people would look down on her, her gown wasn't too out of the ordinary, compared to what Albedo wore. A few of the courtiers had also noticed that Renner was wearing the same gown she had the last time, and bore bothered expressions, but those expressions only surfaced for a mere moment before subsiding. Long time no see, Albedo Kaka. Upon hearing Ramposa's voice, the nobles who had been enthralled by Albedo's beauty, finally snapped back to reality. Not at all, it's my fault for not visiting your majesty in such a long time. Albedo replied with a strikingly appealing voice that matched her appearance. Her back remained straight, and the vertical position of her head remained unchanged, just like she had done the last time around. This was in direct contrast to her gentle demeanor. It made clear her belief that humans were too insignificant for her to bow down to. You do not appear to have changed much, that is a relief. The same to you, your majesty. The way the two smiled and looked at each other could lead one to believe that it was just a warm gathering of friends, and nothing more. You appear to be busy, so I will be direct. Why have you come here today? Indeed. I'm here regarding our previous affair, that being how my country's grain caravan, which was intended to be humanitarian aid to the Holy Kingdom, had been robbed by one of your own. Though this was no laughing matter, Albedo's smile remained steadfast from before. In contrast, his father had stood up from his throne to say, I see, you are here for that. Then allow me to firstly, apologize for my citizens' actions. His father lowered his head and bowed deeply. The king of a kingdom was accepting the words of the other party at face value. In diplomacy, that was something that should not have been done for any reason. In the world of diplomacy, where not even the shrewd were safe from deceit, to confirm the faults of one's country was a major blunder. Never mind the fact that it was unwise for the head of state to directly apologize for something, because that would be akin to the entire country admitting guilt. To have done so would be to damn their country to the Sorcerer's Kingdom's every whim and fancy. No. Considering that we are trying to avoid an all-out war, this might not have been the worst idea. But if the Sorcerer's Kingdom was to demand the head of that noble now, aren't they bound to do so? He couldn't imagine that things would turn out this way given what his father had said earlier. If he intended to refuse the Sorcerer's Kingdom's demands at this point, the one to have apologized should have been someone like Zanac instead of him. After all, the difference in the weight of a head of state's words and his son's was worlds apart. Though just as Zanac's train of thought reached that point, his father's subsequent words put him at a loss for words. Now then, would the offering of my own head allow for the kingdom to receive forgiveness from the Sorcerer's Kingdom? The moment those words came out of his father's mouth, it felt as though the entire room had frozen over. After his shock had waned, Zanac couldn't help but feel ashamed of himself from the bottom of his heart. This was undoubtedly his father's trump card. Though the scale of an incident would affect the response, if the gift of repentance was the head of state, the other party had to accept it, no matter who they were, right? No, if they were to make further requests beyond what was offered, their lack of magnanimity would surely draw condemnations from everyone. His father did not consider himself unfortunate to have to offer up his life, not because he wanted to die, but because to sacrifice oneself for one's own kingdom was for a king to insist on. His father was a true king. Though it was a fact that his father's weakness was in how he had dealt with matters, it appears as though Zanac had been underestimating his father for a long time. Of course, the kingdom will take responsibility for the Sorcerer's Kingdom's grain loss. We could even reimburse twice the amount of grain, should you desire it. That is in addition to the offer of my head. What is your opinion on this offer? Albedo Kaka. Albedo's facial expression grew heavy. Though she was still a smiling beauty, it was oddly terrifying. Haha, looks like you've made a slightly wrong prediction, Ramposa III. Albedo shifted her gaze, apparently to his sister. Was it because you lost that man? Or was it because of something else? Did you find out about the brilliance? Albedo then looked at Zanac. Of your child, and so decided to have a change of heart. I do not believe that I have had a change of heart. Oh, but you did. If this was the past you would not have made that decision. Perhaps it was a combination of a multitude of factors that had influenced you, but your basis as a person had not changed much. Whatever, that doesn't matter. In any case, we will not change our policies towards this matter.